Okay, council, it's 6:30.
The volume.
So for the new participants, we'll get started in a second.
Test.
Testing, okay. All right, thank you for everyone who's here tonight and also the people who are on Zoom. We are going to start our work session and our city manager is going to go over the instructions for tonight because we are going to at some point invite Zoom participants to make comments that they could voice in regards to some of the issues on the agenda tonight. And they will be limited to those 3 minutes like we usually do in council comments. But we'll turn it over to our city manager, Heather Sanchez.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So we have three very distinct topics for tonight. And so what we were planning to do is start with one. Staff would provide a little bit of background. That first one also happens to be where the joint meeting with the Main Street Committee is. So that's why there's a few new faces and we'll do introductions after this. But we also have some Main Street Committee representatives here because it's a time for them to share some of the things they've been talking about, maybe some recommendations, those types of things. And so staff will do a little bit of a presentation. There'll be some discussion among the Main Street City Council. And then once that discussion seems to be winding down on that topic, we'll kind of open it for public comment. There will still be the 3-minute limit per public comment that the mayor referred to. And then once that's done, we'll see if you guys have any further discussion. We'll close that topic. We'll go to the next one, which is a discussion on mobile vending. We'll do it the same. Staff has a little bit of presentation. Council will discuss it, ask questions. Once that starts winding down, we'll open it up for public comment. Once that's done, we'll go to the third topic, which is the raising the bar discussion. So, and it'll progress the same way. So any questions before we jump into the Main Street side of the discussion?
And we're gonna need everyone to speak into the mic. Make sure your red light is on when you're talking because the audience on Zoom will not be able to hear you and we want them to be able to hear everyone. So please speak into a mic that's near to you when you're making any comments.
Thank you, Mayor. And Susanna, Counselor was asking is there a way to show the screen to show if there's anyone on Zoom?
I think one of our
Okay, because, so there's not a way to make him show up there? Because he is on the Main Street Committee.
Yeah, should be able to put him as a participant.
Thank you, Counselor Carson, for your technical assistance. Okay, so he's unmuted and could talk. Mr. Abbey, can you hear us?
Closed captions going on.
There we go. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, you're really quiet.
That's unusual.
There we go. Okay, so I don't know if you heard what I said, but we were planning to start with a little bit of the presentation from staff, and then there will be discussion between Main Street and City Council.
Yep, I got the rundown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susanna, can we please bring up the Main Street PowerPoint? Aaron Miltenberger is on his way. He just texted. So I can just start. The impetus for tonight's meeting is really conversations we've been having over the last 3 years with the Main Street Advisory Committee. So they're a committee that's formation came out of the downtown plan. It was created, the committee itself, I believe, in 2020. Is that correct? Kathy was in charge of it before the Development Services Department was created. And they are really the champions of the downtown plan. And so they have to be a little bit hard-nosed because they have a myopic view of the city. Their goal, they're the stewards of Main Street. And so the parts of the downtown plan that haven't been enacted or maybe could be pursued more aggressively are really the things that they're supposed to be doing as a committee. And so we have this conversation quite often, and lots of times they're relatively minor things. Can we see more patrol downtown? And then the city manager will reach out to the police chief and they'll do some extra patrols. And it's a really great way to get feedback from people that are downtown regularly. Obviously, you appoint all the members, so you know that they're all people with an interest in downtown. So that's sort of an overview of the Main Street Advisory Committee, in case anyone's on Zoom or wants to listen to this later. If we can go to the second slide, please. Okay.
Let me introduce super fast. Counselor Hensley, and let me interrupt. Counselor Hensley recommended maybe quick introductions. I forgot to do that.
I require no introduction, obviously, but I am Rachel James. I'm the Development Services Director, and then we'll go around this way.
I'm Beata Ramza, the planning technician.
Deacon Aspinall, Planning and Development Specialist.
Jan V. Hill, City Council.
Michael Carson, City Councilor at Large.
Eric Schweso, City Attorney.
Ty Coleman, Mayor.
Dawn Krebs, City Council.
Kathy Woods, Economic Development Director.
Lacey Heersink, owner of Spare Cake Brewworks and Roots by Plus Coffee Shop.
Jackie V. Hill, City Council.
Elizabeth Sumner, Visit Alamosa.
Heather Sanchez, City Manager.
Liz Hensley, Mayor Pro Tem, and then also the City Council representative on the Main Street.
Okay. So we have managed to distill down, although I imagine if Matt Abbey was here, the list would be much, much longer. But we've managed to distill down the main complaints to a handful of small things. And they relate directly to potentially a new policy for downtown about vacant buildings, and then also some minor code changes. So an issue that comes up relatively often is that we have a handful of businesses downtown that don't keep any office hours. And so when we think about the sort of the vibrant downtown that we all want for Alamosa, we think about people being able to go window shopping and go into stores and visit with people and have things that are activating through the windows. That's why we want the large windows that start into Main Street. That's why we want mostly retail uses, a lot of those things. And so a handful of our offices keep no office hours. Gobin's is one of them, but we also have a couple real estate offices that don't really keep office hours. So the real estate offices in particular are sort of an oversight in the code. They are the only business offices that are allowed on the first floor of Main Street. So every other business office, if you come to our office and you want to convert something on Main Street to professional business offices of any kind, whether you're an architect or your Friday Health Plan and you're taking up a new building that's not been used for offices before, the answer is no, because we want the first floor of downtown businesses to be lively and retail and things we talked about before. But real estate offices are exempt. They fall in a different category of the code. And so the Main Street Committee brought up, why is that? That's not something we should allow. And they're okay with some of the real estate offices downtown that usually have someone on site that are there regularly so that you can look at a listing in the window and go in to talk to someone. So I mean, those are okay, but it's still not great. It's still not something where you're going to buy something or have an experience, which is what we want. And so we are proposing changing real estate offices out of allowing them downtown. And the code changes are on the next page. They're pretty simple. We're not going to torture you with the code, even though I do have our code expert in case you would like to be tortured. We also have issues with temporary banners. We don't have a definition for temporary in the code. And so temporary sometimes for us ends up being like 3 years. And in some ways, that's a good thing. So Purple Pig, we knew they were coming up with a beautiful sign. You know, Jason talked to us the whole time. We knew it was coming. We knew it was in fabrication. It just took a long time because of COVID shortages. And we are happy to work with people. We'll work with you as long as necessary. But we do need some teeth if you think a vinyl banner is going to last forever. And then also if you don't take care of it and it starts to look tattered and faded and worn. And then the final one, and this one is a problem that many communities have with their downtown, and there are not easy answers, is what do you do with a vacant building and the owner maybe has owned it forever or inherited it, doesn't need it to cash flow, and they just let it languish. So you have a building that's not doing anything, and you know, heaven knows that Kathy talks to these people over and over again and tries to interest them in getting their building rented out. She used to have the problem where she had more buildings than she had businesses, and now she has more businesses than she has buildings. And so the vacancies downtown are not as tolerable as they once were. Not only are they eyesores and they have code enforcement problems, and whether it's damage to the buildings or unwanted entry, but then also we have people looking for business space downtown and business owners, property owners that won't budge. So if we want to go to the next slide, please. Oh, that's back to the first slide. That's okay. One more. Oh, sorry, that was the right one. I'm sorry. I just can't read. Sorry. This is, I kind of went over this, but just it's in writing. So basically only retail businesses allowed on the first floor are real estate offices, and that we consider vinyl banners temporary, and that we have very few maintenance requirement for vacant buildings. So kind of already went over this. I apologize. Next, please. Okay. No, one more.
And Rachel, can I
This
ask you,
one, yeah,
what,
thank you.
what do we consider a temporary banner?
So there is no definition of temporary, but it's usually, oh, the vinyl, like
Yeah, the vinyl.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
usually it. Is that the question? Did I
Yeah,
get
I
it?
just want, I mean, if their vinyl banner is up for a long time and they're gonna, they're trying to work on signage.
We're going to define how long temporary is, but do you want us to define, are you asking whether we should define what temporary is made out of?
I think mostly how long the
Okay.
temporary is legal.
And that is, you can't see it because the captions are over it, but that's amendment number 4. Okay, so amendment number 1, we'd like to remove real estate office from professional business offices. So they remove that exemption. We'd like to move them to professional, remove from sales and services and add them to professional business offices. Sorry. And then we would also like to add in the table addressing the CBD for retail, type 1 and type 2, and personal services. We'd like to add an asterisk. It's just the cleanest way to do it. And so basically, this is a way to control that people have visitors that come in during office hours. So Gobin's is technically retail. Gobin's sells things, but Gobin's is never, ever open. And so they're occupying a storefront that maybe someone else would use for like something that's more activating or something that would draw people downtown. And it's not that we don't love Gobin's. We all love and use Gobin's, but they're occupying valuable real estate downtown and they don't have any office hours. And obviously anyone who's using their business the way they're using it now is not affected by these rules. Like all land use rules, this only affects people that come in the future. Everybody who's already doing this downtown can keep doing it. That's how land use always works. No, not at all. Not at all. It would just be the next person that came in and wanted to do a business like this, the answer would be no. But Gobin's is fine. And the real estate offices that don't keep office hours are also fine. They're already existing. Land use rules can't affect people that are already in place. It's just grandfathering. Sure.
Are we ready for the question session on this one?
No.
Are you sure?
I'll go really fast. There's like one more slide. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so all the asterisk will say is that you have to have work-in business hours consistent with the business traditional use. You can have temporary closures and due to renovations and personal issues. We're obviously not going to be unreasonable as staff. If you're having health issues, if someone's having, some sort of illness and they're closed for 6 months, we're not going to penalize them. We're human beings. And then the final one is we would like to define what temporary means and say that it's up to 6 months. And I believe there's just one final slide. Okay, so this is much more controversial potentially than what we're proposing for the code. We feel like the code is relatively minor, again, doesn't affect anybody already in place. It would just prevent those kind of uses happening in the future. This is something the Main Street Committee feels really strongly about. They want people to have business hours and they want them to be open for traffic. And it's really, really important to them. It's something that comes up all the time. This one is tricky. So we hyperlinked the Pueblo policy so that we can share this presentation later and you can look at it yourself. But they actually have a registration requirement for vacant buildings. They have stricter maintenance requirements, security requirements. They have a fee for having a vacant building, which is $500. And then there's penalties associated with vacant buildings. So they do have a little bit more of an aggressive stance on vacant buildings. And it does push up a little bit on private property rights. So we understand that these are a little bit more controversial. So what we've discussed internally and with Main Street is doing at the very least inspections on vacant buildings and then charging for staff time. And so it would be charging for the building inspector to go make sure that like the roof's not leaking. I do know of one vacant building downtown that has a pretty large hole in the roof and there's just water going in. And I think, you know, that's a problem and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. Whatever code enforcement has to do, there's another vacant building that kind of perpetually has weeds and code enforcement keeps having to send them notices because they're not an owner that lives locally. And then whatever time Kathy puts into trying to kind of motivate them to do something with their building. And then those fees could go into a specific downtown fund. So they'd be relatively minor. It wouldn't be very expensive, but it's just kind of just a little buzz in these property owners' ear and a little bit of an annoyance. So maybe they're motivated to do something with their building. So that was the reasoning there. And that's your last slide.
And we cannot charge more than what the staff time is legally. So we're not going to charge exact time per business. It would be an estimated, what would we on average spend on something like this and just kind of set something flat. I'm not sure we'd be able to get as high as Pueblo's 500. But yeah, legally, we cannot charge more than what we would estimate staff time.
Yeah, and that's why we actually went in and added hours. Our best estimate on what a vacant building in downtown Alamosa costs the city per year. It's not much. It's really not going to be very much, but it is just enough to be annoying. So that's all.
Okay.
So that is the presentation.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and open it up to for questions from council. We have Councilor Carson. And then after your questions, then we have to open it up for citizen comments for 3 minutes, okay? So I just want everyone to keep that in mind.
And can it be opened up for Main Street at the same time as council?
Sure,
For a
sure.
discussion?
Main Street
Okay.
and council, turn your lights on if you want to speak. That's how we can recognize who's next. Councilor Carson is up.
You don't think we can get it?
Your light's not on. Your light.
Think we can get as high as Pueblo?
I don't think we can. I don't think that we have that much staff time. They must have used a different route.
No, okay, so I guess not just from a billing standpoint, but let's say you bill the way you're going to right now with that model right there. And you have like the perpetual weed people that have weeds all the time, okay? Is there a way to send a city crew in real quick, clean that lot, get the weeds cleaned, and then just add that to that bill?
So that's a whole different process. We do that right now.
Okay,
So yeah, we've got our notification. If they don't comply, then we do it, then we do a lien. That's a whole different process.
that's the law. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, that wasn't my original question, I just came up. With the desire to have the retail and the vibrant storefronts downtown, what do we do with buildings like the Friday building that you brought up? Or buildings like the old Alamosa State building that the DA is using? I mean, I get they're the DA, so I'm not saying, but like, what do we do with those kind of buildings? Are we ever gonna enforce any kind of changes?
So we are enforcing the zoning. What they have going that's different for them is they're grandfathered in because they've continued the office use. And so as long as they continue the office use and then there's a certain time frame thereafter, then a new office use can come in. So that's what's happened with the Friday Health Building and Alamosa State Bank.
So we'll just have a rule that if whoever's buying it next, this is gonna be the stipulation, you gotta put in windows.
There's still
Something like that.
the concept of the grandfather rule unless you change that.
Yeah, change of ownership doesn't affect your conforming status.
Oh, dang.
Runs with the property.
That stinks, okay. All right, thank you, that was my question.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Carson.
You have to discontinue an office use for more than 6 months in order for it to lose its grandfathered status.
So Aaron, you want to push your light? There you go, and you could talk into the mic. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt, but it also is just the first floor, right? So you can have office space above the first floor. We're really just saying retail on the main, and that's just Fourth Street or Main Street that really has that use. It's not Sixth, it's not Third, it's really just Main Street, Fifth Street. I guess maybe it's Fifth Street.
brought that building up because it's a really cool spot.
Yeah.
It's like a really good location, and have windows.
Okay, we need to, sorry, Mike, we need to do the,
All right, so since this is kind of unique and everybody's trying to get used to mics, so anybody who would like to say something that are part of the Main Street Committee and want to make any comments or counsel, just turn your light on and then we'll recognize you and you can speak, okay? Go ahead, Aaron.
So I think it's important that council knows that this is really something that the Main Street Advisory Committee has been driving based off of the downtown revitalization plan. We really want to have, I think, just like council, a vital downtown. And I think a lot of business owners downtown have felt frustrated when they see buildings that very much should be and could be used for a vibrant downtown that are just kind of billboards that just sit there or are serving a warehouse function. It's not the spirit of the downtown plan. And so IMSAC worked with the city to say, like, what can we do about this? And we really appreciate Beata and Rachel and city officials who put that plan together. But I think it's important to know that this was driven by business owners in downtown trying to fix what seems like an issue.
Yes, Counselor Hensley.
I may have missed it. So is this all the code recommended changes that you were discussing? The reason why I ask is I think one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong from the Main Street Committee, I think one of the things we wanted to do is part of that real estate, or if it's a separate one, that like ones like Gobin's, that we talked about having certain hours they were open. We didn't.
So it's an amendment number.
yeah, I think that's number 3 addresses that.
We didn't do specific hours, but the hours consistent with the business.
I'm perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that.
So if there's not more discussion, we have 2 options. We can,
I think one thing, I think you have a Main Street Committee member, Matt Abbey. Did he want to have any comments? Yes, hand is up. Go ahead, Matt, make your
Yeah,
comments.
can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So actually, thanks for the opportunity, Mayor. I don't really have a lot to add. The discussion with Councilor Carson and Rachel's presentation and Aaron's additional comments really are kind of the whole package as I understand it. It is something that's been driven from the committee, these questions, for the council to, accept or reject, obviously. But the spirit of the downtown plan is to have an active and vibrant Main Street. And so there are kind of a couple of things we're trying to figure out how to wrap our heads around and tackle, without breaking too many eggs. And that is, what do we do with these perpetually vacant buildings? I've got the Hobbytown building. Us and the Demlos talk frequently about, the old Oscars building across the street. It's been empty for over 20 years. And then also remembering that, when a business comes in, one of our motivations to make downtown work, generate tax revenue, to generate action, is that there, be something for a visitor to do. And so, real estate buildings, real estate businesses kind of sit on the fence there. So I think maybe this language is the correct direction to go to make sure that they're, actually engaging. They're not just an office for hire. But we also need to make sure that when buildings change use, that we're kind of on top of it. Not too many years ago, we did have a huge inventory of empty buildings. And, to the community's credit, it told the city which direction the citizens wanted us all to go. And we're trying to do that. And that work and Kathy's efforts and everyone else's has really pushed a lot of energy onto Main Street. Now we have businesses looking for space. And so, maybe 10 years ago, we'd have taken something, anything in a storefront just to get an occupied storefront. But now we don't really have that pressure. So there are examples, and there will be examples in the future where a new use is not compliant, that a building has, under the code, the zoning has changed, and maybe it hasn't been enforced, and it should have been. I'm not suggesting anyone needs to go, tear the Band-Aids off of those, but probably should sit a little firmer and a little closer to the code when those situations develop.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abbey. Counselor Krebs and then Counselor Carson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a small handful of questions. So would it be possible, and I'll use Gobins as an example, is there any kind of regulation against having two businesses in one space? If Gobins was to bring in a retail for the front half of the store, something like that? Or a businesses purchases a building with that intent? How about that?
So technically, the business offices, so if you had a business office, you can't have it on the first floor. So sharing isn't an option for them.
Okay,
But Gobins is technically allowed, they're retail. But
okay,
if they had something more activating in part of their first floor, that would be great. That'd be something we couldn't enforce, but we would encourage them to do.
okay.
So we have, one of our weird buildings is the Dulce building, that used to be the Early Childhood Center. I
Oh,
believe Matt
yeah.
Abbey mentioned it in his email.
Mhm.
And so that one has like a half story sort of a thing, like there's a couple offices on the first floor, and then there's sort of like a couple steps, and then it's a second story or a half story sort of. It's a weird, we debate all the time about whether or not it's a true second story. And so the way that we've kind of worked with that is we've told them, okay, so you can use your half story as office space because it's a pretty large office space, but do something on your first floor, share your space. Whether you have a masseuse in there, or you have an art studio, or you do, something simple. And we have Kathy talk to them all the time. It's a great way to use that building, but still fulfill the spirit of the code.
Okay, thank you. So on the one slide about the vacant building, do you have a solid definition of what a vacant building is? And the only thing I'm thinking of is the movie theater space sometimes gets used for events but not as a retail space per se. If you bring this forward and then one day a year, there's retail in there for whatever reason, do you have a solid definition for what defines a vacant space?
We don't, but this is a great brainstorm, so we can include a definition when we bring actual code amendments before council.
Okay, and the one business that you said with the hole in the roof, Counselor Carson, made a comment towards that general direction. Because it's dilapidated, can the city be stricter about that?
So that one we probably can pull the trigger on. We haven't wanted to because it's a prime location and because Kathy's worked really to try to get the owner to do something. And because it's not in a position where we want to start the process where it gets torn down, but really it's sat empty for so long that we're probably there. It's just that as much as we have a reputation, or I have a reputation for wanting to tear things down, I never want to tear down buildings. And so I would love there to be a route that wasn't that route, because that is where that route ends. If we start the notice of violation process with that property owner because their building has a leak and we do inspections, and that's where that ends. If they won't fix it and they don't have the means to fix it and they don't want to rent or. So I do believe that's probably our next. We have actually a pretty comprehensive list of code enforcement issues that need to be addressed downtown, but we've just been kind of unrolling it a little bit at a time.
Okay. And then my last question, would there be plans to eventually, like long-term, to extend this onto the side streets? A lot of the downtown in small towns, you can go down side streets for retail businesses. Would that be a slower rollout? This is just the beginning of it? Because
I think that would be more involved in not necessarily like a rezoning, but changing overall the zoning, because the central business district covers that area, but then it's specific for front facing on Main Street. And so once we get to that point, council can raise that to say also front facing on these other streets, but we would have to change the code in that way.
Okay.
And I see Deacon shaking his head, so I'm assuming I'm correct.
Yeah, you're spot on. And I think this is a good time to put in a plug that The next comprehensive plan is coming sooner than we all think. And I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind when we get to that point as well. That will be a really natural time to have that discussion.
Okay. And those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, and Counselor Carson?
Just to Counselor Krebs' point, I was gonna say, and I don't know, this may be something for Eric and Harry, but, a leaking roof like that, especially if it's bad, will eventually eat and rot the foundation, which can cause safety issues not only to that building and then long-term damage issues, which would be costly to any owner, which you don't want to incur. But it could also probably affect the safety of the two adjoining buildings since they're so close. So just heads up on that. I don't know for sure. You might talk to Harry, but I know they've told me, you know, with your own home, don't let water hit your foundation because it'll affect it. But just off the top of your head, do you know, this may be a dumb question, but do you know if immediately any of these rule changes, not that people that own businesses from out of town don't matter, but if they've had a building vacant for 20 years, I don't think it's on their high list of priorities. But does this negatively affect anybody right off the bat that's downtown? Do you have anybody that's going to show up at City Hall with pitchforks and torches that off the top of your head that this would really? Because I mean, these are all rules. To me, this all seems like stuff that if you're in this, if you're in this business category, you're not really taking care of your building or you're not addressing a lot of what's happening anyway. But is there anybody besides like we talked about Gobins, maybe them being in a situation or? I don't think
So
Friday helps.
so what we've got is a grandfather situation, so the existing ones, but for those that are vacant, the amount's gonna be small, so as Rachel indicated, it's more of this nuisance. If they need to come register, we're gonna be inspecting. It allows us to, we can get in there anyways, but it's easier to get in there, do the inspections, follow up with them and do other things like that. The amount itself for any property owner is probably not gonna be something that they come after you with pitchforks. I know from one of the vacant buildings for the theater, I don't think it's gonna be anything that motivates a change in that situation, type of thing. As far as pushback, when we take out real estate and we add, you know, the businesses, those who do have a vacancy, or if they get a vacancy, it's gonna limit a tiny bit what they can put in there, type of thing. So I would think that would be maybe the major pushback, is if someone comes up with a new vacancy or someone currently has a vacancy, we obviously wouldn't be allowing new real estate or any business that's not doing business hours with normal business hours, some things. So it limits it a little. So that's maybe the weighing factor, is it offset by the more vibrant downtown philosophy?
And not to simplify it, but does it almost give us like a probable cause to inspect some of these dilapidated?
Gives us
like,
ordinance
legal
authority to do
means?
so specifically, yeah. I mean, we could do it now anyway, but it
It makes it
clearer.
easier, yeah.
Okay, good.
And,
Alright.
and just that, I'll throw out a wild idea because this is a brainstorming work session. So Rachel is correct that if you're looking at a vacant building fee or charge, it has to be reasonably related to the expense that the city is undergoing. So Pueblo's $500 and our whatever that amount might be for us. Voters could approve a vacant building tax, but that would be something that would have to go to the voters. If you wanted to get a heavier hammer for vacant buildings, you could do something like that with voter approval.
People too, that's a good one. People are at each other.
I don't mean instead of, I don't think you're gonna get any pushback on the fee. It's just, I don't know that it's big enough to accomplish any change.
It's at least poking at them and creating a little bit of a conversation that maybe isn't happening right now, type of thing, is what I would say. But it's not gonna be an amount that's gonna motivate someone to sell the property.
This reminds me of a conversation I had today where people were saying, did you give me that check for $500,000? You know, it's like, it's kind of one of those things, I guess.
So we got two mics on. I'm not for sure whose mic was on first.
Jackie's was.
Jackie, okay, Jackie, Counselor Beal.
I'm just curious, the building that you're talking about with the hole, that's the Oscars building? No? Which one is it?
A different building. And so we have a soft touch with downtown. Again, I know we have a reputation as a heavy-handed building, but we always send Kathy. So instead of doing the traditional
Thank you.
notice of violation and making it really ugly, we really, we don't ever want to tear down building. It broke my heart to tear down the Walsh. I don't want to do that. And so we always send Kathy. Kathy's been talking to these people for years, and he inherited it from his parents. His parents, one of his mother was passing away for kind of a long time. And so I don't think he has the means to fix it, but he's also completely unmotivated to use it or sell it or rent it because he just owns it. And so I mean, I wouldn't underestimate how annoying we can be. We can be annoying, very politely, but annoying.
We're gonna step it up.
Yeah.
So like the vacant lot right next to it where it has, well, I haven't seen it lately, but does it still have a lot of weeds and looks terrible?
Kathy also talks to those people, and I think they got a formal notice of violation for that this week. So weeds are kind of outside of our purview, but damage to buildings, it's a relatively small hole in the roof. And so that's why we kind of thought we had time. If it was a serious downpour, and we do inspections, there was a foundation issue at a different building that we inspected and started a process with. If we think the building's in genuine danger, we will intervene. But this is kind of a small hole, and we just been trying to motivate them to fix it, but it is something that we will be more aggressive about.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Hill. Ms. Kathy.
Well, I just wanted to give you a little bit more of an update on those buildings we're talking about. The one that is kind of weedy, has weeds kind of growing out of the front of it and all of that. I've been in touch with them and it stopped short. So I don't think they're ready to do anything with it. So I think that's a good opportunity to put some pressure on them. The old Oscars building was just, darn it, it was just the luck of getting ready to do construction and then COVID hit. So they had this really cool plan called Hotel Alamosa, and it was going to be a keypad entry and 9 or so rooms. And then after that, product was really high, wood, refurbishing materials. And so they're just on hold. But it's an owner out of the Denver area, and I had on my list today to call him again and let him know about the weeds, but I didn't get there today, but I'm gonna do it tomorrow. I've even gone to Pueblo to meet with them, and we'll work on that one. That seems to be the most devastating one right now. I think that people are really bothered by. The old Friday Health Plan building, I think there's already something in place that it's going to be purchased. It'll remain office space for that. So.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question on that one? Just because there was a lot of chatter on Facebook on that. So the weeds on their parking lot. So have you let the bank know or something that they've got to take care of it?
Yes, so for Friday Health,
Oh.
Kathy was connecting with Sam on the phone number for the person who's been locally managing the property.
Are you finished, Ms. Woods?
I am. Thank
Okay,
you.
Councilor Carson.
Heather, is there any way, and I don't know if this is something that is something we can do or it's out of line or not, but like, let's say in this business's situation where they have this plan on hold and they're trying to soften the blow from the material, okay? The spike in material cost. As a city, is it possible for us to, in certain scenarios, waive like the use tax? Like if they buy the material here in town, is it possible for the city to waive like the use tax on one purchase or on do you know what I mean? Cause I've actually had contractors call me about that. And I'm like, dude, you can't do away with use tax. The city, it's money the city generates, but in thinking about a situation like that, is that a possibility as a concession?
So what we
To
would
help?
normally do, or what we've done historically when working with businesses, is evaluate their economic impact, and we run them through that formula. And then what we have done is a development agreement. And so based on what the economic impact is, we'll bring to council what you think is an appropriate type of situation. How we've structured the ones that we've done, is a reimbursement of the sales tax once the business is up and running type of situation, because we don't have money up front to give them type of thing. If you wanted to do something, do we do a certificate where then we could issue a certificate to where they're not paying the sales tax? We would need to investigate that a little bit. But again, we need their numbers, run the economic impact, and we always like to get a feel for how serious it is also type of situation. I think, even though we thought some were serious, that they kind of backed out. I think also the other types of things we've done in development agreements is, I know for the boutique hotel, they needed to put in, I think it was they needed to do water and sewer. One of them was probably going to need to be replaced at some point by us. So we are going ahead and doing that part of the project. So it's kind of project specific, but we always want to start with running the economic impact. My impression though, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, even if we were to waive sales tax, I think this person's moved on from that plan. Like, I don't think they're waiting for the market to change. I think that the project's probably dead.
I would think so too. I don't know that for a fact though. So, and we always do get inquiries about that building, people that would like to occupy that building and fix it up. So it is, yeah. They gutted it. They did a lot of work, right? We worked with the architects and they got a lot of it cleaned up, but yeah, it's time to move on it again.
Okay, thank you, Council Cripps.
Just a couple more questions. This one's about the temporary banners. Do you have a set time frame for too long? 6 months? Okay, cool.
So in case they didn't get caught, 6 months.
Yeah, that's the change we're proposing.
Okay, and then, and faded and tattered, how specific and not subjective is that?
So we currently, temporary banners have to be grommeted and can't be torn and things like that already. The specific definition for a sign, temporary is a sign not intended for permanent use, which is a very vague definition. And so this just gives us something really solid to say, all right, this is the deadline.
And in your presentation, it alludes to that sign is representing the name of the business, but what if there's another similar vinyl sign for sale, special sale today, something like that? Would that fall under the same parameters?
I imagine the way that it's written, yes. We already sort of enforce if it's looking badly, but the 6-month thing would apply as well. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And I'm thinking back to when JCPenney went out of business and they were going out of business for quite some time and those signs were up forever kind of thing. So and they weren't tattered or anything, but they were just always there. And my only other question, it's just because I'm not sure of the law. Can we charge, because I'm not a soft touch, you guys know that. Can we charge a higher fee for owners that are out of a certain radius of the city? If someone lives out 100 miles or 200 miles out of the city, they would incur a higher fee for vacant property or dilapidated properties?
So the answer to that was no, from a legal perspective. The other is, philosophically, I'm not sure what the logical difference is. If a building's vacant, regardless of who owns it, it's having that impact type of situation.
Okay. I just think the motivation of someone in Denver is much lower than someone who drives by it every day themselves. So that would be my only, and their motivation would be more financial versus having to see it. So that was where I was coming from. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, Council Carson?
Don't we currently enforce a harder penalty for people that live out of town or within an hour, like of cleaning your sidewalks? Don't we have a window we don't?
No.
Like for business owners, don't you have to have someone in town that?
We have a
Have we talked about
requirement
that?
for anyone, a time frame of when they have to have their sidewalks cleared. There's no deviation between local and not local.
I don't know. I thought we had a conflict.
The only one that you may be thinking of is for short-term rentals. They have to have an operator or an agent who lives within the San Luis.
There we go.
So Council, we still have 2 more items to cover tonight. So I want to make sure that we're conscious of time. And we want to make sure that we let the people who are on Zoom who want to make comments to let them know that now is the time. Do I have any other questions of the committee, Main Street Committee members or any council before I go to Zoom and give them instructions? We're good? Okay, so for the Zoom participants, if you could use the raise your hand feature, if you would like to make comments on this portion of the agenda discussing Main Street Committee Code recommendations, raise your hand, we'll recognize you. You have 3 minutes. We will be timing you.
I got
for
it.
The 3 minutes. And we will ask you to politely end your conversation if you're still talking past the 3-minute mark. I do ask that since you are trying to make suggestions, also try to, or you may have concerns, also think about solutions that you could bring to the table as well. Okay, do we have any hands raised at this time?
We do not.
Okay. So I don't see any hands raised, so we'll go ahead and close this segment and go on to the next segment on the agenda discussion on mobile
So-
vent.
So Mayor, I'm sorry, before we go there, is there anyone that is not comfortable with staff bringing these recommendations to you from a voting perspective?
Go ahead, Councilor. Reed.
I'm good with all of it. I just want to be careful with the impression that we might give business owners in downtown, even though they have a vacant building, I don't want to strong arm them to get out with crazy fees. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Vio.
Any other feedback if we were to bring this before you guys? Okay, I just wanted to kind of make sure I knew where everyone was. Thank you, Mayor.
I think we're good. You're welcome. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, discussion of mobile vending.
And at this time, so we can be clear who's audience and not, we'll probably ask our Main Street partners to become audience members because they may then want to put a different hat on, type of thing. And so then this will be council discussion once staff's done this presentation. And that, me saying that gave Susanna a little bit of time to find that other presentation and hopefully bring it up.
Okay.
Tonight covers two of the things that we get the most pushback about downtown. So we get a lot of pushback on food trucks in our office and also a lot of pushback on the retail offices rule. So we're gonna talk about both of them tonight. So the first slide, please. So this is just a snapshot in time is the first slide. So for the 4th of July, the Frosty Acres ice cream truck wanted to be part of the 4th of July event, which makes sense. We don't have an ice cream store downtown. And because of how strict our food truck rules are, they were not allowed to be downtown. So one property owner downtown who does not sell ice cream refused to sign off and allow them to be within 200 feet of a brick and mortar. So we will go over the rules, but we just wanted to go over briefly why we're discussing this. So this was sort of maybe the straw that broke the camel's back. We have this happen all the time for special events. Pretty much every time someone gets a license for a food truck, First Fridays. Poor Beth has been in our office a million times and in Main Street asking, can we please do food trucks for First Fridays? So it's something that people feel pretty passionately about allowing, but it's also something that people, brick and mortar stores downtown still feel passionate about not allowing. So we felt that the time had come to revisit it. But this one, I mean, just this one issue, really, it was an ice cream truck. They weren't going to compete with any of the brick and mortar downtown, and they were vetoed and they weren't allowed to be part of 4th of July because of how the rules are written. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just to review the key points of how this ordinance works, you can't park on a public street or in a public parking lot except around some of our parks. We have special zones that we allow for food trucks. We didn't bring those maps, but we're happy to share them later. They're a little bit odd. It's very specific, very limited area near parks where a food truck is allowed to be. You have to be more than 200 feet away from a brick and mortar restaurant. You can violate that rule, but you need written permission, so a sign off from the brick and mortar in order to be allowed. And you're not allowed to set up on a vacant lot anywhere in the city. Next, please. Okay, so just the facts, those are the two ordinance that establish mobile food vending. And this doesn't apply to ice cream trucks because they're basically always in motion. And trucks at private events for no more than 2 days. So like Beat the Heat, this is how we have food trucks for Beat the Heat and Summerfest. Next, please. Okay, so this is a really open-ended. We don't have really specific things to guide you towards as much as we're pointing out the really problematic parts of this ordinance so that we can discuss them each. So basically, this is the one where we don't allow them around public parks and we don't allow them in parking lots. And so these maps that we have, again, are pretty rigid, pretty small, narrow areas. Is that something that council is interested in revisiting?
So for these, we're gonna have future slides for some of the other parts of the food truck, like the 200 and all of those. So we're just gonna walk it through type of thing. So this is the first area. How do you guys feel about really tightly limiting them when it comes to publicly owned parking lots, parks, those types of things?
And it is usually just like one parking lot next to one park. You know, so it's like if if you're a food truck operator, it is it's not like you can be anywhere around Boyd Park. Like it is one very specific area. And that was the way, it was designed that way. When these rules were created, they were created very specifically to limit them.
So I had, is that a question you're asking? I have a question. I've had people who own food trucks who say a couple things. One, when we made this ordinance several years ago, there wasn't a lot of food trucks, and we were trying to make sure that we protected the brick and mortar businesses. But they're saying that now things have changed and people are becoming more used to food trucks. And by having food trucks in areas that may be close to other businesses that are not selling the same food, they don't understand why they should be banned from that area. So what are your thoughts on that?
So that's gonna be one of the other slides coming up. We were just starting with what we thought the easy one was, which is, do you care about public parking lots and parks? Like preventing them from being in public parking. So we're coming up a future slide on how close they are to restaurants and stuff like that as a different discussion point.
So Councilor Vihil, then Councilor Carson.
To answer that question, I am good with opening it up.
Cool.
Carson too. So for those who are on Zoom, okay, all right. So I'm open to opening it up as well because times have changed since then.
Okay, so next slide.
Thank
Okay.
you. Okay. Okay, so this is the 200-foot rule. This one is the one we get the most pushback on. So there's a couple options here, but one of the ones that we think of internally that might be effective is what if, so say with the Frosty Acres ice cream truck, what if they just needed a majority of business owners to approve? Or what if it's near, or what if there's other criteria, like what Mr. Mayor said? I mean, what if we did something where, say it's an ice cream truck, there's no ice cream stores nearby, it's not a competition? Is
And
that?
would that be on the next slide?
It's on the next slide.
So can you
but-
go to the next slide as well,
But
Suzanne?
it ties, yeah, perfect, yeah. Or the last slide.
Oh, the last slide. Yes, please.
Yeah, so it can be part of the, because it part of the general discussion, but yeah, we probably could have put it on that slide. But it is the 200-foot rule, basically for First Fridays, like when the Moki was trying to find a place for First Fridays, the closest they could be was kind of like the New Friday Health Plan parking lot. And that's nowhere near where First Fridays is happening. And so it really kind of limited the Moki from even participating. So these are other questions that we're asking. I guess part of that is the 200-foot rule. Could it be do something where you only need a majority of business owners, or could staff have the ability to interpret like you're not selling anything that's going to compete with something that's nearby that's brick and mortar? We do want to be respectful of the fact that brick and mortar have much more investment in their property, although food trucks are not as cheap as they used to be. And their standards are pretty high as well in terms of the health department, but it's not as expensive as a store, obviously.
Or is it, so it's, do you want to keep the 200? Do you want to change the 200, 100, 50, something like that? Do you want to get rid of the 200? Do you want to keep the 200 or some distance and consider the menu? So there's a play there that you can have with all of that.
Okay, I think Councilor Carson, then Councilor Vihil. You had you first.
Keep in
Oh, and
mind,
then Counselor Jackie.
this room
Beal.
is 60 feet long about, okay, end to end, long end. So you're talking almost 4 of these rooms away. That's pretty far. I mean, I think shortening it would be just logical. I mean, because even on a city block, that's almost half the city block. I bet you 1,000 feet. I bet you they're not 1,000, 400 feet. So half a city block, yeah, that's pretty far. So I think getting it closer to 100 is probably reasonable. I mean, that's my opinion. Shrinking that distance is,
Okay, thank you, Counselor Carson, Counselor Yon V. Hill, then Counselor Jackie V. Hill, then Counselor, I'm sorry, Hensley, then Counselor Krebs. All right, remember that order.
So here are my thoughts. Shorten up the distance. I would be good with you guys if you had the ability to, we don't want a burger truck next to a burger brick and mortar. I'm good with that. Diversity, on the special events, open it up. That brings more people in and it boosts money for everybody involved. Then there was another slide there. It said about private vacant lots. Open it up. If the private owner's good with it, let them go.
Thank you, Counselor Yon V. Hill, Counselor Jackie V. Hill, Counselor Krebs, and then Counselor Hensley.
I have a question. Do you tax them at all? The
mobile.
the mobile vendors?
They're taxed like any other business would be taxed.
Okay, so they are taxed.
Thank you, Counselor Jackie V. Hill, Counselor Krebs, and Counselor Hensley.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I am for this. I really am. I do think it needs to be discussed more. I don't want to swing the pendulum in all the way into the other direction from where it is, excuse me. But I totally recognize that food trucks are small businesses as well. And some of our brick and mortars started as food trucks. So I totally get it. And I'm 100% for it. I am for the 100-foot distance. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. What I don't want to see a few things downtown. I don't want to see a lot of food trucks with generators in front of businesses on First Fridays when people are trying to walk by and there's that smell and that loud generator going. I don't know how to regulate that, or keep it to a minimum. And I don't want to see the same food truck in the same spot every single day at the same time. I mean, we're giving them the ability to be downtown, and special events is great and First Fridays is great. Now I'd like to see, I love the fish truck. I'd love to see it a little bit closer and not have to go hunt it down. But I don't want to see it pull up in front of a business in downtown and block that visual from people driving by, to block that brick and mortar as well. So I just think there needs to be a balance to it, but I'm special events, absolutely 100%, shortening the distance to 100 feet. And I'm also for, I think that the rule that all restaurants within that frame has to agree or it's a no-go is a little archaic. And I think just trying not to be so subjective with it. I mean, I get it. The ice cream's a good example of no one was serving ice cream. What's the big deal? And I totally 100% understand that. And I'm on their side with that. But then if a hamburger one comes in, we have to be mindful of that. And I don't know how to do that without being subjective about it. So just vetting that through.
So Deacon, as I'm processing what Counselor Krebs is talking about, and we talked about opening up the parks, public parking lots. So those are obviously kind of very separate areas type of thing. We probably could still keep it where we don't allow it in just a public parking on the street unless that street's been closed off for a special event type of situation. I feel like that could accomplish kind of what you're talking about, someone just pulling up on Main Street in a parking spot, on-street parking, and running it type of, and it feels different versus when San Juan is closed off and it's the whole special event, or if you're in a parking lot or in a park that's more separated type of thing. Does that seem to kind of get at what you were talking about on that part of it?
Yes, absolutely.
How does that feel to everybody else?
Well, I just laugh because could you imagine if we allowed a food truck to park on Main Street with all the complaints we get about truck semis hitting mirrors and all that? Oh, no, they want people to get run over on Main Street. So no, that I totally get.
And is there a chance that the city can, just not, and I'm just kind of nervous about them coming like every single day because they can. Will they have to pull a license or something for like a 1 day
I think
thing?
there's a limit on how long they can stay in one place, isn't there?
Right now, the ordinance, I don't have the exact language, but, you can come in and it's like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., something like that, and you get 30 minutes at the beginning, 30 minutes at the end, to set up. So there is a limited amount of time, but there isn't, for how many days in a row you can be there.
So they can't park and stay there overnight.
Yeah, they
And
can't be there
so-
overnight.
Yeah, they can come within those timeframes and then they have to leave, but they can come back the next day if that place is available.
And it's not like a set spot. So they have to, in the application, they have to give us the general location they are planning to park regularly, but it's not like only their location. Another food truck can come as long as it has a permit with us and
Okay.
also use that location.
And the permit, that was the phrasing I was looking for, as long as they have something that, even a nominal fee that they pay the city to be allowed to be there. And so,
Yeah, right now, all of them have to
Okay.
do the permit except for the temporary events.
okay,
So if, in that case, if they're only there 1 or 2 days for a special event, then they don't need a permit. But otherwise, all of them need permits with us.
Okay.
Even if they're planning on only being on the street for 1 day, they do need a permit with us.
okay, awesome, thank you.
Hey, Counselor Hensley?
So I also kind of agree with everybody, what everybody's saying. I also think it's hard. It gets into a gray area to say, okay, it has to be like the ice cream thing, because then what if somebody says, well, I'm selling ice cream too? And I do think we open a can of worms if we say what kind of food and stuff it has to be. So kind of feeling more to leave that open. And I'll tell just a quick thing is, so when I opened Chili's and Chili's was coming into town, everybody freaked out. Oh my God, Chili's is coming here. They're gonna put us out of business. And it was a huge deal. And the bottom line is yes, competition is good and times have changed. But what that does is if you have a business and you have something somebody wants, you're gonna be successful is really where it's at. And it's marketing it, getting it out, things like that. And so in a sense, food trucks is a newer thing or a new. And obviously there's food trucks that are going to do well. There's food trucks that aren't. And what it does, I think, for restaurants, et cetera, is obviously they have to find out what their customer wants and things like that. So I just wanted to say that I don't think Chili's put anybody out of business. And obviously here in the Valley, we like to go out to eat. But yeah, so I think I agree with what everybody's saying so far.
Okay. Let me go to Jackie, then I'll come back to you real quick. Counselor Vihil, then Counselor Krebs.
Okay, so I'm in agreement with the food trucks and has anybody approached, I'm just thinking, where the lumber yard used to be, has anybody approached businesses like that and said, there's a possibility that you could, instead of it being vacant, that these food trucks could come in and you can charge a fee and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we have been definitely talking about that. And today was crazy. I was going to talk to the owner of that property today, but I'm doing it tomorrow. And yeah, I think that's a good spot.
But that also segues, because I think we skipped, if you can go to the previous slide, Susanna.
One point, just for clarification, we had agreed that we're not gonna enforce like what kind of food they could sell, right?
From a legal perspective, I would advise that is just really problematic. to
Yeah,
put
because then
staff-
everybody's gonna say, well, I started selling burgers last week, or I started selling tacos last week. It's just gonna start all kinds of.
I don't think.
Okay, so let's pin that, because I think we need to have further discussion on that. But I think one of the other questions, tailing off of Counselor Vihil's comment of, right now, we don't allow them on private undeveloped lots. And so the lot you were talking about, even though we think it would be cool and we told her about it, technically probably couldn't happen. So I guess the question from you guys, after I hear what Beata's question is, are you guys okay waiving that from a vacant lot perspective? Beata, was there something I said wrong or?
No, I just wanted to clarify that in the ordinance, it basically says, so that would be a good, right now, that would be a great spot in everything except for the fact that it's a dirt lot. So in the ordinance, it says it can't be undeveloped property. And so they would need to pave it and like make it a full zone, a full mobile food truck area, and they need to pave it to do that. That's just how that ordinance reads right now, so that's why. So otherwise, it would be a good spot, it's just that right now it can't because it's not paved.
Okay, so Councilor Carson, and then I have a question for you, Beata. Councilor Carson.
So what about the lot across the street? Are we allowing parking there? Would we allow parking there because it's not paved?
What lot are you talking about?
City private lot, the one that's half paved and half not.
Well, so one, it's not ours, so they need to get permission from the property owner. And part of it is paved. And so depending on the 200-foot rule would be what would determine it. But Beata, you're the one that knows it in and out.
Yeah, according to the ordinance right now, if they got permission, as long as they got permission from Fridays, they'd be able to park their truck on half the lot, the paved lot, but not the dirt part.
So we didn't allow any people for farmer's market on that part of the lot.
The farmer's market is different. The farmer's market is allowed, and it counts as a special event.
Say that to now. You know what I mean? That's just one of those things. So you gotta be careful how you bite yourself in those particular situations. Just putting that out there. Cause that could, you know what I'm saying? Just
So my question was regarding the paved part of the lot, and I think you just answered that. The ordinance states that the lot has to be paved to utilize it, like that one that we're talking about. And if not, we have to only allow the paved section.
Which is a pretty expensive investment for an empty lot to pave it to do food trucks.
So in these conversations, in these conversations, hold on one second, let me finish. In these conversations that we have, is it up for discussion for us to say, well, can there be an exception for unpaved lot for?
Well, that's why
food
we've
trucks?
got it for you for a question right now, is do you want us to bring it back to you with that change to get
Yeah,
rid of
'cause I
that
think that's what
requirement?
Counselor Carson, maybe you've been alluding to, right?
Mhm.
Maybe.
If we can do the mic.
Yeah, and not to, the one thing that I would ask, and this is, well, I guess it's private property, so if we allow an exception and they have the person, they deal with that on their property however they want, they can sign a waiver, do whatever, then we're not liable as a city, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, yeah, I'd be fine with that, just in that situations. I think that particular gesture would go a long way. So, yeah.
And that's what I was just trying to point out to make sure you and I are
Yeah.
pretty much saying the
Yes, sir.
same thing on that
Thank
one. Okay. Okay,
So I've got a pin and something on the menu
sure.
that we need to continue to discuss, but on the undeveloped lot, anybody else uncomfortable if we bring back a change to remove this restriction?
I'm not uncomfortable with it. I just think it needs to be very strictly defined about what would be there. And my example is I went to visit my daughter in Texas. I apologize, but that's where she lives. And they had food courts where they took a lot, covered it in gravel, and then allowed the food trucks on it. So there were no weeds, there was no growth issues. It was fenced, that kind of thing. So if we could approach it with more of a aesthetic mindset to say, you can do this, however, there are things to make it more public facing and not, people don't have to walk through weeds or anything like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Krebs. Okay, I think Ms. Sanchez wanted to finish.
So the
with pin.
pin we put in was this discussion on staff trying to say, okay, well, you're not selling the same type of food, so you can go here versus, and that is kind of, one, you're going off of them telling you, because we don't have the capacity to follow up and is their menu accurate and all that. But then it's okay, well, you got Woody's Q Shack. So if they're selling fish, do you think that makes a difference on if Woody is comfortable with them being there or not type of like, so that's, we need more, do you really want us getting into the menu type of thing, or is it just distance?
No, because remember we just ate what was the one we just ate? The blue chip, or what was it called? They had all kinds of different stuff. And so you put a truck there, any restaurant's gonna be able to argue that they're competing with one or two menu items. So yeah, I think you guys are right on.
I do have, if we're done with this, I do have one question when we're done
Yeah,
with
and
this.
I don't think we're done quite yet, and what I was gonna recommend before we start making decisions is to open it up for comments, and then that way that may bring up some more conversations before we make a decision.
Yes, sir. So one of the items we had, which is slightly different, and it caused us to change what we do for our special events downtown. We had a church come request to close San Juan, and then they essentially did a barbecue right there. It was free food type of thing. And so obviously, it's not a food truck, but it was free food, which from a business perspective, who's going to come into your doors when they can go get a free hot dog or a free hamburger? So my assumption is this has been all about food trucks. We probably still want to keep that you can't do free food when you're right there in our downtown area type of thing.
Yes, because we have parks to do that. And it really takes away from the business owners who are downtown because there's not any competition because it's free.
Yeah.
And that's where people are gonna go. I don't, go ahead, Council Carson.
I would make one exception, which is really weird probably. But if some entity wanted to do a charity event or some event where they wanted to give food away downtown, and they came, we could say, sure, you gotta buy all the food from downtown restaurants or something like that.
Okay, well, and I know, Kathy's been working with a group that they want to do free food, but what they're doing is they're giving them tickets that then they take to the businesses. Things like that type
That's
of
better.
thing, so.
Yeah, $30.
Mhm.
What if they're selling hamburgers for 50 cents?
Thank you, Eric.
We'll figure it out. We don't need to help them with the loopholes.
Go ahead.
That's also, to be honest, if they don't have a food truck, that this is about food trucks. And so the ones that were doing that, most people who have a food truck, they have expenses to pay, so they're not going to do the 50-cent thing. Those that do that, they're barbecuing out on the street with tables and stuff.
So what I say is let us keep our wording, and then if someone starts doing loopholes, then we try to figure it out at that point in time.
Good. Councilor Cribs.
Veering away from that, and I do hesitate because I know that there are some businesses on First Fridays to help promote First Fridays. They do give away food. So however is decided on that. My question back to the food trucks is, are there hours of, how late does the permit allow it to run? I understand not overnight, but.
I don't have the exact time. I think it's sometime around 9 PM.
So my question is, can we look at that? And I don't mean it in a bad way, but the bars close late. Sometimes there's events downtown that run late. And frankly, I would like to walk out of a bar. I'm not going to promote anyone in particular, but it would be nice to have maybe a pizza food truck, or something to go, oh, hey, because we all know that at 10 o'clock at night, literally everything else is closed. And so just giving food trucks a opportunity to probably maybe till midnight, maybe till 11, nothing disgustingly late, but just to give them that opportunity.
Yeah, so actually, sorry, that was my bad. It isn't, so we have two different time schedules for two different zones. If they are in a residential zone, then it's only 8 AM to 9 PM. If they're like near a house, or like 300 feet within a house, so not just a residential zone. But if they're in a completely commercial zone without a residential house within 300 feet, then they can be open from 6 AM to 2:30 AM.
Oh, okay.
So they could totally be by a bar super late
All right, never mind then. Thank you.
and in the downtown as well.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for that clarification. Okay, Ms. Sanchez, so did we get your pen? And are we ready for?
If you want to open it up to
Okay.
public comment.
So we'll open up to public for public comments. So what we're going to do now is open up the public comments for the audience participants who are here right now. And then we'll go to Zoom and open it up for those who would like to make any comments on Zoom. During this open comment segment, you only have 3 minutes to make your comments. We will time your comments. If you're still talking at the 3-minute mark, I will politely ask you to end the conversation. For those of you who are in the audience right now, you will use these mics over here. You'll turn the red light on or either whichever one closer and speak into the mic. And since we don't have comment cards, after the first person finishes and whoever else having a comment in the audience, just go up next, okay? We'll start off. Sure, you can go there. Whatever, either.
I just don't want, I don't want council to have to turn their heads to look at me.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council. I know that one of the things that I've heard from downtown businesses who aren't at the work session today, but hopefully would give voice if this came before the public for public comment, is that there's a significant difference in overhead between food trucks and brick and mortar. And I'll remind council that one of the goals is to have a vibrant downtown, and the investment into the purchase of a building is a massive investment. That for many people who own downtown buildings are not just business investments, but they put their homes up as collateral. These are personal investments into our community. And I don't think we should wall off competition. I'm all for competition, but I think the first priority in the spirit of this policy initially was in incenting brick and mortar businesses in our downtown corridor. And I want to make sure that there is not a disincentive for doing that by bringing in all these food trucks, right? We still want to have businesses, retail areas that are vibrant in our downtown. I also agree that there are a lot of complementary businesses that could bring more folks in to create a vibrant downtown. So you have a tricky thing that you've got to balance. I just want you to also bear in mind that the overhead is smaller, the investment is smaller for food trucks than it is for brick and mortar businesses. And really what we want, first of all, are those brick and mortar businesses in a vibrant downtown corridor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome.
I think that owning a brewery, kind of has opened my eyes too to the food truck, world. I used to own one, just a coffee food truck, but we just did events, so I can't speak to, being there daily, like you were saying. But I think that on Main Street, especially during events, say First Friday, a lot of restaurants are closed by the time the event's over, or if there's still people out generating sales for some of these businesses, there's nowhere to eat, which I think a food truck close by would be a great option. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, next.
From a Visit Alamosa and tourism perspective, I agree that food trucks could complement the downtown vibrancy and continue to be a draw. We're actually looking at food trucks at the Welcome Center. Haven't landed. It's a difficult conversation, just like you guys are having here, but it is something to consider. I think the scope of what food trucks are and that scene has changed enough. I'm so grateful that you're reevaluating that. I will speak to special events, like Lacey mentioned, and to the, sometimes there are food samples. A big part of that is the communication with the downtown businesses and saying, hey, this is what we're looking at doing, and not getting that one no. I do really like the majority idea here, so it's not left to one person. Just a random thought, but during events, I will say that the free samples is usually what I eat at First Fridays, because it's, the restaurants button up, they sell out, they close when they, sell out, and the food doesn't always last that long. I clean Domino's boxes up every single first Fridays. Every single first Fridays, there is like outside food in the trash bins when we're done, just for what that's worth.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to make a comment? If you could come up into the mic.
So as a visitor still in this beautiful valley, beautiful Alamosa County, you know, one of the greatest things that I've seen is the community here. You know, there's this argument, or I shouldn't say argument, the back and forth discussion. And one of the coolest things that I've seen is, you know, an outsider is the recommendations. You know, I've sat down and had somebody say, you know, Purple Pig, you know, their pizza's fire. You can't beat their pizza. The burgers right across the street at the I'm sorry, Jazz, I should have said what's up to you. But you know, there's always businesses recommending other businesses, and you almost don't even need the rule book at this point. I don't understand why it's still going on. You know, and I think the big picture should be the way the tail end of the summer is going to be looking at when you know, the big you know, when the big court cases are going on, and the you know, I think that you all know that about the new across the street from Milagros. I'll leave it at that. I think we all know what we're talking about. But like, that's the big picture, because we're going to be having a lot of tourists coming here at the tail end of the summer, and we should be planning on that. And we can do a rotation as well, in my opinion. You know, even down there at Tent City, where people stay up all night, we could get some food trucks out there. People like to stay up all night. I wake up during the witching hour. It's fun. I've got a good community during the witching hour. A lot of traffic comes in and out of the crowds, people coming in and out of town. And if we could just figure out a rotation, you know, one day at a time. But I think that, you know, I don't know what you guys are planning for right now, but we should be planning towards the tail end of the summer, where all businesses can thrive in this town, and we could all make money from the tourists. And you know, recommend other people. Obviously, cleanliness is going to be extremely important. And the managers in this town that I've gotten a chance to talk to, Michelle at the Alta, man, she works so hard, and she does such a good job protecting the community. I will say this: there was a 13-year-old that did some graffiti on the bathroom yesterday. She doesn't want to press charges. She's out there trying to clean it up right now. But you know, the managers protect the communities, and they do it everywhere as well. Or even, you know, Dennis over at Loaf and Jug, man, Larry, all of them. And they all recommend everything to everybody. I mean, it's almost like you don't even need the advertising, because the word of mouth is so beautiful in this community, guys. And, you know, this is just from the 30 days since I've come into town. Today marks my 30 days. I've had a lot happen to me, a lot of beautiful things happen to me, a lot of, you know, not so beautiful, but at the same time, you know, from a visitor here still, before I get an Alamosa address, everything's been beautiful, and we can figure that out as well, I think, with the food trucks, to bring it back full circle. To find a rotation, even if we can get some of those food trucks in the Walmart parking lots, or at the down at Tent City.
Thank you. Thank you
All right,
for your
thank you, guys.
comments. Thank you. So now we're going to go open up the comments. Since I don't see anyone else in the audience, we'll go ahead and open up the comments for Zoom participants. For the Zoom participants, if you would hit the raise your hand feature on your screen, we will recognize you and allow you your 3 minutes to speak. So at this time, anyone who's on Zoom, if you have any comments that you would like to make regarding mobile vending, now is the time to raise your hand to be recognized, and we will allow you that time to speak. I see one hand raised. I can't see the name, so can you all
It's
see?
Mr. Abby.
Okay, Mr. Abby. Okay, the clock is starting. There you go. You can start, Mr. Abby.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time. I'm kind of a split opinion personally on the food truck thing. I appreciated Councilor Krebs' comments about, you know, the generator noise and, you know, the safety concern, maybe keeping them off of Main Street. If the food truck regulations were to be loosened, I'd would lobby pretty heavily to at least keep them off the main stem of Main Street, mostly for, you know, view corridor, so people driving past can see the businesses. when we're having active events, First Fridays and the like on Main Street. That does spill up and down San Juan and other streets. So, that I think probably would be sufficient. Having them out in front of the businesses, I wouldn't be super excited about that. That said, going back to Mr. Biltenberger's comments, there aren't a lot of people in the room that have actually bet their house on getting an old building back in service. I have, and I can't understate the investment and the anguish and the risk that goes into that. So I think we're being a little foolish if we're having this conversation without some restaurant stakeholders involved in it. And we probably should go buttonhole some and invite them to the conversation and make sure we understand exactly where they're at. If this conversation was about a pop-up Christmas shop or toy store that came around during the busiest time of the year for me, I'd be pretty furious about that. The fact of the matter is a lot of these businesses are marginal most days of the week, and we rely on the tourist season, the busy times, and the events to make a little money. Hobbytown's profit is made in 2 weeks, between the 2 weeks going up into Christmas every year, and the rest of the year it kind of gets by. So we need to keep in mind that, as First Fridays has gotten more popular and restaurants, I mean, this is a blessing that our local restaurants some of them have sold out of food on First Fridays. They will adjust. Yep, I see the Domino's boxes too. I hand out sausages on the sidewalk to people that want to go through the appliance store. I went and talked to all of the surrounding restaurants first to see how they felt about it, and they said, go for it, because it's not much of an impact. Certainly not the level of impact a food truck would make. So I just would advise a little caution and a little circumspection and maybe a little deeper dive before, making sweeping changes on something that, will be a direct competitor to the people that are helping us build Main Street.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think I see another hand raised.
No, that's you.
Yeah.
On the right?
Doesn't trust me.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that anyone on Zoom, now is the time to speak your mind or make your comments. After we close out this segment, you will not have any opportunity to make any comments. So if you do have any comments, now is the time to raise your hand so we can recognize it and give you an opportunity to make your comments. Okay. I don't see any hands raised. Am I correct in saying that, everyone? So
Yes.
we'll go ahead and close this segment and just basically follow up to see what should be some of the next steps that staff would like to hear from council.
So I think, I think we've got pretty good direction. I also think what we can do is make sure we get notice out to our restaurants. And it's not just the downtown, it would be all of our restaurants. And so we'll look at how that makes sense. So when this does come back before council, everyone's aware of the timing of it, has an opportunity to contact you either in advance or at that meeting type of thing.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, did you need any clarification from council before we go to the next item? We're good? All
Since
right.
we walked through it,
Yeah.
that was helpful.
Okay, good. All right, that brings us to the last item on the agenda tonight. Raise the bar discussion.
So this is a discussion that picks up on discussions council had had, and I can't even remember how many years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago, I think. Really was the last time we had a citizen initiated petition or talk of a citizen initiated petition, and caused council to look at what the requirements are for getting a petition initiated and on the ballot. And those requirements are set out in the charter. So the only way to change them is by putting a ballot question on for a charter change. And way back 5 or 6 years ago, or whenever it was, council was seriously considering that and had discussed in some level of detail what a change for citizen-initiated petitions might look like. And I'll get into that. But every time an election was coming around, it just didn't seem to be the right time to put it to the citizens for one reason or another. You didn't want to hold an election on that issue only because of the cost of doing an election, a standalone election like that. And then every election that wasn't a standalone election had issues on it that we didn't want to junk up the ballot and risk what we were very what were very important issues to get the electorate to pass for council to move forward on some bond issues and some tax issues and things like that. Didn't want to junk up the ballot and risk having those go down because that can be an effect of an overly complicated ballot. So if council is still interested in changing the requirements for initiated petitions, this might be a good election in which to do it because we're already participating. So it's not incurring the cost of an additional election. You're going to put the marijuana questions on the ballot. And there's not a whole lot on the ballot, at least from a city perspective, that we worry about conflicting issues with it being on the ballot. So that's why it's coming up. Do you want to think about this again? And if so, is this an opportune time to do it? And I'll just refresh the way the initiative and referendum requirements currently work under the charter is a petition must get 10%, a signature from a number of people that is 10% of the people who voted for mayor in the last election. And that will put their question on the next upcoming city election. If they get 15%, that can force a special election that has to be held within a certain time frame, unless there is an upcoming city election already scheduled within 90 days. So that's what it is currently, 10% of the number of people who voted for mayor in the prior election, or if it's 15, a special election could be forced. What you had talked about when you had talked about this before was making a couple of changes to that. One would be to require that petitions be gathered from every ward. So rather than just 10% of the people who voted, it would be 10% from each ward of the people who voted, or of whatever your percentage is. So one, make it from each ward. The other was, rather than make it a percentage of people who voted for mayor in the last election, make it a percentage of registered electors at the time that the petition is approved. So, you know, depending on what voter participation rates are, assume roughly 50%. That roughly would then double your petition requirements by making it being based on registered electors rather than on the people who actually voted for mayor. And with that, eliminating the ability to force a special election. So if you get your percentage of whatever it is, you don't get to force a special election. You get to have your issue placed on the next general regular city election. So we don't incur the cost of a special election for initiated matters. Now, that wouldn't apply to referendums. Referendums is where, when you pass an ordinance, someone can get a petition to have a referendum on that ordinance where the citizenry can have that overturned. That obviously would need to happen more quickly and wouldn't apply in the referendum situation, although you could make it that way. Final change was to think about requiring a higher percentage for a charter change petition than for a regular ordinance change petition, because an ordinance you can fix if it's problematic. A charter issue can only be fixed by a vote of the people. So if a charter change came through and proved to be problematic, there's nothing council can do to fix it. other than put a question back to the voters again. So that would be the requirement for a higher percentage for charters. And I did print off, and we'll pass around. This is a CML document. Oh, let me take half of them and pass them the other way. This is a CML document that is just a breakdown of the percentages that home rule cities throughout the state require for their petitions, just so that you know. And as you can see, they vary quite a bit. I don't know.
I'm betting you the mean is 15. Or at least the median,
I haven't done that work. So I,
just looking at it. It's 15.
yeah, it could be. It could be. You had thought, or we had kicked around back when this was first bubbling up, 10 for ordinance changes and 15 for charter, but that's why I gave you this breakdown, is to kind of look at what people are doing around the state.
And just if I can, Eric, for the new counselors, the reason why we thought about this 5 or 6 years ago is because we did staff did so much work on research and outdoor growing or indoor growing, indoor growing of marijuana. And we put together a nice, we thought was fair and balanced ordinance, and we passed it. And then the citizenry came out with a petition, and it got struck down. So that's why we said every ward at 10% or whatever it was. Just some history.
I think also at that time, the state was doing their effort of raise the bar, which I think got passed. Which then said, you know, every area had to have that coverage as well.
And
So from a timeline perspective, if council remains interested in doing this, we obviously need to move quickly. Because I think we start to get our ballots in October, which means I need to do the public education in September. Not only that, Eric needs to prepare the question. We need to get that to the counties.
Do the first week in September, I think. Yeah.
So there is some time sensitivity to this. I would just ask that we only do this if this is something you guys feel strongly about. Because it's not as if we didn't have a completely open September with nothing else planned. And my public information officer is on maternity leave. So, we'll make it happen if that's the direction council wants to do. But there is some time sensitivity because I don't want to pay, we're not paying extra, but we shouldn't put it to the voters unless we're prepared to do some public education. And to that point, we may want to have a small budget as well to maybe do an informational mailing or something like that. But I'll turn it over for your discussion.
okay, I see Counselor Hensley, and then Counselor Krebs.
I'm not, if everybody goes for it, I'll go for it. I am not at all that motivated to do this. I feel like, yes, we had that one situation. I'm gonna be honest. If the voters really feel like it needs to be put on there, and then they also voted it, I'm okay with that type of situation. If I had any inkling to make a change, it might be for the special election, but at this point, honestly, the whole time I've been here, we only had that real one, so I'm not feeling like it's a huge issue at this point, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Hensley. Counselor Krebs?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have some clarification questions, Eric. When you say percentage of registered voters, can you give me not a number, but like an example? Is that, how do you pull the top number of registered voters in the last election if only so many voted for the mayor, but only so many voted for city council? And do you just take the top number?
Well,
So
the county has that number.
Okay.
So we could just you could call them up today and say, how many registered electors are there in the city of Alamosa? And they'll tell you 2,500 or whatever.
So for that line.
It doesn't matter how they voted. That was the change we were recommending.
Not
Not that they, so before it was those who actually voted
Okay,
versus those who were registered, which is a much higher number of people are registered. So that was the recommended changes. It doesn't matter if they voted or not or who they did. It's purely that one number from the county of how many registered voters.
And currently for the standard, which is how many people voted for mayor, we know that because we have the election
Yep.
returns. So we can just look that up.
and so looking over these city initiatives, I'm seeing, a lot of them are percentages of voting in last election is just a general voting in last election. Is there a reason that that's not one of the suggestions, or was that too ambiguous of,
Well, that's our current standard.
that's the current? Okay,
Our current standard is 10% of people who voted for mayor in the last election.
okay.
Not the mayor who got elected for the office of
The
mayor. So
mayoral race, yeah.
for
Right.
both, however many candidates there were, you total up all those votes, that's your denominator.
Okay, and that was my differentiation, because this was specifically mayor, and then this just said voting in last election. And so I was just making sure that there wasn't a,
And I will
a
say,
conflict.
we didn't tally it, but if you look closely, there are quite a few that are registered,
okay,
not just voting.
But the reason that that's a good indicator of the mayor thing is because when people go out to vote, you get, okay, the mayor's on every ballot. You know what I mean? Like wards are only on wards ballot. So the mayor, most everybody's gonna vote yes or no for the mayor, whoever they like. So that's a really good indicator actually of that. So, but to that point, I think this is just one of those things that if we do go down this road, it's just because we have a whim, or I don't think there's a real good reason to do it. I agree with Liz. I think this is just those things are.
I do have to agree with them. It feels a little bit, I'm probably using the wrong wording. It feels like a knee-jerk reaction to what just happened a few weeks ago. And I don't, if we're going to be thoughtful about this, I don't want it to look like that. And it's not even bad optics. It's just, that's what it feels like to me, because the way that we have it now, I think is absolutely fine. And to Liz's point, this is the first time in how long that it's even been, brought up. And so I'm fine with it. Changing a charter is a huge deal. And it's a good timing for us to go into and talk about, because we do have that, we are spending the money already, but I don't think it's necessary.
Thank you, Councilor Krebs. Councilor Young.
My comment's quick, Mayor. I will say, I think this is not a knee-jerk reaction to last week. I think it's a reaction to 5 years ago. We just didn't have time to get it done. And maybe the elections weren't the right time to do that over the last 5 or 6 years. But so 4, 5, 4, 6, 5, 4, 3 years ago, I would say we got to do this. But I'm kind of like Liz now too. I've been on here for almost 12 years. It's only happened once. You have a lot going on in September. Like, I'm cool if we just leave it alone.
Okay, and then I have to agree with Councilor Vihil. This is not a knee-jerk reaction, but I also understand being a good steward with the funds that we have if we want to take advantage of an opportunity to put something on the ballot now that we've been strategically waiting and waiting and waiting. I think this might be that opportunity where it's not really costing the city any additional monies. And this might be the time to just do it because we've said no, like Councilor Vihil said, and Councilor Hensley over the past couple elections or so. So this might be that opportunity that our attorney has pointed out to us to look at. So.
Doesn't sound like there's any strong push for getting it on the ballot, so. I mean, unless someone wants to strongly push, that's the sense I get.
Well,
I would agree.
you look-
I'm really not familiar with everything, the process and everything for the ballot, but I mean, I really don't have any opinion one way or the other because I don't know. I don't know enough information about it.
just for a layman perspective, I'm just saying, just because this is the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong. This would have made it much more difficult for them to have pulled the petition off 5 years ago, right? Yes. Yeah, okay. So that's just the way I look at it. And it would have been, right? Or no?
Well, yeah, and I think when you guys were asking Holly, how many signatures do they need to get for this most recent, and it was like 100 and something. If we use that half vote turned out to vote, that means it'd be over 200 that they'd need to get. So that's the scale of what we're talking about.
And then the other comments we had back then, and I don't remember all the comments, but I think what we were trying to do when we said incorporate all the wards is to make sure that we were not getting all the comments from one particular area, and that's not fair. And that's what we were trying to make things fair. That's what we put a lot of thought into this, lots of thought and time into this several years ago. So that's why you're gonna hear us talk about it, because we remember these work sessions slowly coming back to us. So it's not like it's knee jerk by any means, but it is an opportunity to think about, because now we don't have a lot of competing factors, and we do have some things that may come up next year that may have some competing factors.
You won me over, Mayor. We should put it on there.
Okay. Do you want a consensus right now to have an idea? Because I would be for it now, because I have said no these last several times because it wasn't the right time. But now I think it is an opportunity if you need a consensus, however you all feel we should move forward with.
Eric's the one that's gonna do the heavy lifting to prepare it for your council agenda. I'll be doing the heavy lifting for public education.
Yeah, well, and so the council agenda comes first, and I guess what I would say is if it's just two of you who want to move forward and the rest don't, we'd bring it to council and it wouldn't go further, so why go through that effort?
Okay, so do you need to get a consensus right now so you can see? Because we haven't.
Yeah, let's
voiced
see
our
anybody
consensus.
who's interested in bringing it forward.
And I'm with everybody. I won't say indifferent. I'm torn, but you guys bring excellent history to it. I'm just urging you to look at the optics of it. They couldn't get the marijuana on the ballot, so they brought it to us. We approved it, and now we're going to turn around and make it harder for people to put things on the ballot. Okay.
I get what you're saying. There's 2 for, there's 4 against, it's dead.
Well, no, I mean, you guys bring excellent points up. I'm just saying, look at the long term of it.
I'm good. I'm good. Take Counselor, I'm good.
Councilor Hensley? Yeah. All right, so I guess that's that.
That's all we had. Did we open
Anything
it up for the public?
We don't care about the public on this one.
Listen.
Well, so what we were doing
Yeah.
for work sessions is regardless of the topic, having
So we've been.
a
to form-
public.
We're doing public comment at every work session?
Yes.
Yes.
When did that start? You guys are
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. All right, so what we're gonna do, so that we can keep order, we'll go ahead and open it up for, public comment, 3 minutes segment. If anyone in the audience who have any comments regarding, council's discussion on Raise the Bar, you have 3 minutes. You can come up to a mic and start speaking. Any comments? Okay, go ahead, turn on the mic. Just push the button. Daniel, there you go.
Daniel Paul Roach again. By no means do I consider myself a master gardener, an expert in marijuana. I'm always learning, I'm always growing, but with over 17 years experience here in Colorado, as well as working nationwide, I have an eye for the good and the bad. I've seen it happen in different counties. I've got some friends right now I want to give a shout out to a married couple in Crestone. Sarah and Aaron, they're with Revel Cultivars. They've got some issues going on right now with, they're trying to get their wages garnished due to some information. It's too much. I don't want to go into too much detail, but there's some people that don't need to be in Alamosa County. And I would love to work with all of you guys whenever we get to that point, once I get an Alamosa address, Jazz, quit licking, sorry. Once Jazz gets an Alamosa address with me as well, I know silly as that sounds, but there's, there's some people that shouldn't be doing business here in the marijuana industry. And I'd love to, if you guys would allow me, be a part of that board. It'd be an honor to. And I'd love to talk to you afterwards, Ty, about it. Hey, and I want to invite all you guys as well. Thank you very much to the young firemen that showed up last week. They rolled through the Quality Inn. We had a great time. Friends and family were there, and the young firemen that showed up. I want to say thank you guys for being there. It's great to know that they're there. But we're gonna hang out at the Square Peg tonight, and Jazz wants to buy you a beer, Mr. Ty. She doesn't have an ID, but anyways, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm rambling now, guys,
Okay,
but it's
all right.
important that I let you guys know that there's some people that don't need to be doing business in this land. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we're opening up for the Zoom participants. If you would like to make any comments in regards to the discussion council is having on Raise the Bar, please use the raise your hand feature on your computer screen and raise your hand so we can recognize you, and we'll give you 3 minutes to make comments. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Am I correct in saying so?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and close this segment of the agenda, and we'll go ahead and end this work session. Thank you, everybody, for your participation and your comments. Thank you.